Hello, sunshines. So welcome to Chapter 12, the lymphatic system and cardiovascular system. They group these two together. So I highly recommend you have a copy of the PowerPoint printed and that you take notes on it as we go. I'm going to be taking notes I can to help you along. Okay, so overview of this chapter. Oh, why did that switch spots? Interesting. Okay. So first we'll start out with the cardiovascular system components, functions, and then we'll go into more details on each part. We'll look at the blood vessels, the heart, blood pressure, and then we'll look at the parts of the lymphatic system and their functions. So cardiovascular system components, we've got cardiovascular, so pen. So cardio, heart, right? And vascular is vessels, right? So our cardiovascular system is our heart, our vessels, and then the blood within, right? Ooh, let's use that. Fun, fancy and distracting. I won't use that too much, I promise. Okay. So the main function of the cardiovascular system is transportation, distributing blood and everything in it. So what are we moving? Big deal, we're moving gases, right? Oxygen that our cells need. Cells need. Anybody remember why? Our mitochondria use it. Cellular respiration. To make energy, right? To make ATP. Make ATP, right? Energy. Ooh, that's not pretty make. Well, make do. Okay. And so then what comes out of that process? Cellular respiration. We make energy, but also carbon dioxide, right? So wastes that we remove, carbon dioxide, nitrogenous wastes a lot from muscle contractions, and just regular cell work. Right? So we bring in things the cells need, oxygen, nutrients like glucose, also to make ATP, and then the building blocks of our big structures, our carbohydrates, our complex molecules, right? Amino acids to build proteins. What else does it distribute? Endocrine, hormones. Ooh. And so those hormones allow us to have long-term communications. We've already talked about hormones. They go to their target cells and they help them make changes, right? This helps the hormones find those target cells. Find target cells. And make changes. So it's all about getting things the cells need in and their wastes out, right? Transporting them where they need to go. Okay, so here's a diagram of our large arteries carrying blood away from the heart and veins returning blood to the heart. So we'll start looking at blood vessels. So blood vessels are the route that blood takes around the body and back to the heart. And so this is a lovely picture here. So we've got the heart, right? Leading away from your heart are your arteries. Think arteries, away from the heart. Whew, okay. So these are really big. They're under high pressure. They're going out to their targets. So they branch and branch, and as they get closer and closer to their targets, they become arterioles, and those arterioles lead to capillaries. So this is where we have the exchange of gases, wastes, nutrients, and then they've done their job, and now they're going to start returning back to the heart. So we're going to start returning to the heart. So venules are small vessels that are going to merge into veins. And the veins go towards the heart, right? Arteries away, veins towards. So we're going to look at each of these parts in a little bit more detail. Okay, so first leaving the heart, we have arteries. Arteries are going to be under the highest pressure because that heart is contracting, it's pushing blood out, high pressure. Blood is under high pressure. Ooh, high pressure. I'm under pressure while I write that. Okay, so modifications that arteries have to help. The first arteries you'll come by are elastic arteries, like the aorta that you can see right here. So the aorta is an elastic or conducting artery because it has a lot of elastic fibers. It has to stretch and withstand lots of pressure. So when the heart ventricles contract and push blood out, the aorta stretches, and then when your heart relaxes, it's going to recoil and keep that blood moving forward. So when you feel your pulse, you're feeling the difference between the high pressure when your heart is contracting and the lower pressure when your arteries are pushing. So lots of elastic to stretch. And then after those stretchy arteries, you'll get the distributing arteries, the muscular arteries, where they've got a large layer of smooth muscle. So they can control which organs are getting the most blood flow. So if the smooth muscle relaxes, the space is bigger, you're going to send more blood into that organ. And if it constricts, that space is going to get smaller, less blood is going to flow into that organ. So muscular. So they've got smooth muscle. To control blood flow to organs. And your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous systems, your autonomic, are going to be controlling where blood flow goes. Right? So in rest and digest, the renal artery leading the kidney is going to be more relaxed so that you're sending more blood flow to your kidney to get filtered. Whereas when you go into that fight or flight sympathetic mode, you're going to constrict and send less blood flow there, but open up the vessels to your skeletal muscle so you can get ready to run, right? Smooth muscle to control blood flow into organs. Okay. Blood flow into organs. Okay. So we're just leaving. We're going further and further away from the heart, right? Okay. So your aorta is the body's main artery coming off of the left side of the heart. It's going to be under the highest pressure. You're going to have several branches going to the rest of the body. And your pulse, as I said before, is going to be that difference in pressure from when the heart is contracting, higher pressure, and then when it relaxes and the aorta and those elastic arteries. So you'll feel high pressure, low, each heartbeat. So if you measure your pulse at any point in your body, it should be the same beat because it's based on the changing pressure as your heart beats and relaxes. Okay, so here's a really nice view of how that smooth muscle can constrict or relax. So vasoconstriction, that smooth muscle contracts. And we can see how then there's a smaller space for blood flow, right? So leading to an organ, less blood will go there. And vasodilation is when that vessel relaxes. So there's a larger lumen, there's less pressure, bigger space. Bigger lumen. So you would expect more blood flow there. So if you have too much pressure on a vessel, you can have what's called an aneurysm. So there, the vessel wall is weakened and it balloons out. So you might have headaches if this is in your head. I'm just showing a few types. So what can happen is if it bursts, you'll have huge blood loss, and it can be life-threatening. It can also form clots that can go around and cause like a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, or pulmonary embolism, stroke, etc. Okay. So our arteries are branching and branching closer and closer to their targets, and as they do, they're going to get smaller and smaller, and they're going to become arterioles. Arterioles are going to have 3 layers of wall down to just the one when it gets to the capillary. And they're going to be the greatest resistance that blood goes through. So basically, after it gets through the arterioles with lots of smooth muscle, that blood pressure is going to drop. Okay? Blood pressure drops after blood moves through there. So in the capillaries and venules, it's going to be really low pressure. So they've got lots of smooth muscle, and so they're going to control where blood flows within organs. Within organs. So in your lungs, for example, you're going to want to send the most blood to areas where you can pick up the most oxygen, right? So the arterioles leading to the nice lung space, lots of oxygen, will open up. Whereas if there's low oxygen, there's high CO2, you're going to constrict those blood vessels and send less blood there. So now we get to the capillaries, that exchanging point, where we have just a single layer of simple squamous epithelium, a little bit of connective tissue basement membrane, and that's it. It's a very thin layer for things to move through. So you can see in these pictures, capillaries are just a single red blood cell thick. They're right next to almost all your cells in your body, except for those that are avascular, like cartilage, for example. And that's where you're going to have the exchanges. So oftentimes they'll form a capillary bed, and you'll see this branching to it. And the reason that we show this as red in the arteries and blue in the veins is to show that the blood is deoxygenated. It doesn't actually turn blue, it's just a darker red, but this is easier for our eyes to see. So then those vessels are going to merge back together and go towards the heart again. Return to heart. So first they're going to be small vessels called venules, and those are going to get bigger and bigger, and then we call them veins as they go towards the heart. And so remember differences, we have a much larger lumen space, we have valves, and a thinner wall. They do have a thin layer of smooth muscle. They can be active in vasoconstriction and dilation, but they're not going to change pressure very much. So here's our lovely view again, except blank. So going away from the heart, we've got arteries. They're large, lots of elastic and smooth muscle, and those get thinner and thinner as they go to their targets, and they're arterioles that lead to our capillaries, where we have the exchanges of nutrients, gases, wastes. And now it's time to go back to the heart. So those capillaries merge together and we get venules. We've got valves, and those merge together to become veins, and they lead back to the heart. You can do that there, so it's pretty. Okay, fun. Okay. So because our veins are so low pressure, it's basically zero when it gets back to your right atrium of your heart. So the first thing that we have that we talked about a lot is those valves in our veins. They're going to help reduce blood flow backwards. And then we've also got the contraction of skeletal muscles, or the skeletal muscle pump is shown here. So basically what happens is when our muscles contract, they put pressure on those veins, and the blood is forced through the valves up, and then it can't go back down. If you don't do this, your vessels can get leaky, and that would be an example of that would be varicose veins. So keep walking, don't be too sedentary, move around. And we do the same thing with pressure changes in our chest as we breathe. So this is the first part. We'll go on to the next part after this.